There we go. So good evening, everybody. My name is Jeff Abramowitz. I am the CEO of the PD Green program, which is a nonprofit that does educational tutoring inside of prisons and jails across the country, and also a public policy chair for the Coalition on Adult Basic Education, which is the advocacy arm for adult educators in our country. And I know there's some people still jumping in, so I'll give them a second. Awesome. So thanks for everybody being here tonight. And if you could, just curious, and I know there's some people watching in a group, but if you could come to a consensus and answer this question and throw it in the chat. If you can give me one word that would describe what an advocate is, just one word, and throw it in the chat box. I got a lot more people jumping in. One word: zealous, change agent, support, voice. I love it. Promote.
I like voice. I'm changing mine to voice.
Okay, you can do that. Support. Fighter. Love it.
That was the first word that popped in my head. Thanks, Rosie.
Cool. All good. There's no right or wrong answers here.
But some are better than others.
We do not judge around here. We're curious and not judgmental. So, all right. So, everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Nope. Awesome. Let's get this going here. So as I said, everybody, can you still see it? Yeah. Okay. My name's Jeff Abramowitz, and I'm for the next hour, and I promise I'll be on time, we're going to spend talking about advocacy and in preparation for Capitol Hill Day, and super excited about the discussion we're going to have tonight. I do have a few rules before we even begin. Rule number one is please, if you have a question, just unmute yourself and jump in the pool. I really can't stand when you attend a workshop or a lecture or anything like this and you have this great question and you wait till the end and you've kind of lost it. So if you have a question or a comment or you want to share, please just unmute yourself and jump in the pool, and I welcome it. So that's the first rule. Second, I try to be really respectful of time. So I promise I'll get everyone out of here within an hour so that you can go and enjoy the rest of your evenings with your family or whatever else you're doing. And third is I will be sharing the slide deck with everyone because at the bottom, the last 4 slides are 4 slides filled with resources. So all of those slides will be shared with you so you can have them. They're not just resources on advocacy, they're resources on criminal justice reform. So the things that you'd want to have, information you want to have as you go and you meet with legislators and you talk about whatever we're talking about up on Capitol Hill and trying to influence people. So I guess we should start the discussion today and understand why are we doing this? Anybody? Why are we doing this? Anybody? A good reason. Why are we going to Capitol Hill? Why are we advocating in this particular case? Anybody?
The system's broken and we need people to step in and to show where change is needed, but not only that, but to advocate with those people who make the actual change to get it done.
Awesome. So I heard a lot of change in there. You had to make change happen. Yeah, for
Can
sure.
I speak to that too, Jeffrey? I think for me and maybe some of us on this call, it started with prison education. How do we help get training and education to change futures and change results? And then when you really dive into it even a little bit, you realize there are so many factors that affect someone being able to receive that training and make something of it. And so when I look at this, this is such a necessary piece to even make prison education successful, that we've got to address all the factors that are going to create that environment for success.
Yes, and I want to highlight something, is that we're giving a face to the faceless, because for most of us on this call, we sat in cells and in dark dungeon places, and we waited for a day that someone would advocate on our behalf or speak to our situation and give voice to our circumstances. And I apologize once again for not being able to be on camera, but I will show up and show out on Hill Day. Trust me when I say that, for P2P. Myself and my colleagues and all of the people here. But that's what it's really about, is giving, we hear the statement, giving voice to the voiceless, but it's really deeper than that. And I want to add some context to that. As a person that did 23 and a half years in one of the most viral places in America, as a veteran, I've been in war-torn countries, and I'm gonna tell you right now that the worst challenge I ever faced was the 23 and a half years I did in California Department of Corrections. And so my wife didn't hold it down for me. She held it up. She was the voice that went to the hearings, that stood in the face of not just opposition, but stood in the face and wake of community discourse and all of those things, the backbiting and the vitriol, the denial and slander from family and friends and people that she thought were there to support her. And she stood against all of that to support me in this space. And so that's what we're here to do, to give a face to this movement and help people understand. Hey, Christy, I see you on. Glad to see you, sister. We had the unique pleasure of really connecting at rewriting the sentencing conference. So I'll give it back to you, Jeff.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mance. No, I appreciate that. I think, and again, I think that the issue of why is different for all of us. Like, we all have a different why. I mean, I did some time away. I did 5 years down in the feds. We all have a different why of why we got involved in this, why it makes us move, why we get involved. But the truth is that when we talk about the why, that's what really gets people thinking, and that's what gets them to move to action. Because we could talk a lot about our whys, but we really want to effectuate change, and that's what really advocacy is about. It's understanding how we can tell our stories to effectuate change, how we make things better and fix things. And I wanted to start today off by us all thinking about our whys. And before we go to Capitol Hill Day, you should really know what your why is. Understand, like, why are you doing this? What is it that drives you to be where you are and to want to speak up, to speak out, to represent, to be the voice of others? Like, why is it so important to you? And I promise you, if you can really define that well, then when you go to talk to a legislator, you talk to a legislative staff, your why comes through. And that's really what gets people moving. And that's what gets them moving closer to making change. So let's talk about change in the landscape today. So the reality today up on Capitol Hill, and we're all going to be there in a little bit, is that, our legislator moves at, I want to say, a snail's pace, but that's too fast. We move at this incredibly slow pace in all levels of bureaucracy, at all levels. And it's super frustrating for people that have a why, that have a passion, that really want to move things forward. But I want you to know this. In the work that I do, and the advocacy work that I do, you really have to understand that it's like eating an elephant. You do it one bite at a time, and you keep doing it. And eventually you see steps that move forward where things begin to happen. So it's going to be frustrating for many of us that want to move really fast. And sometimes you need to pick your lane. I'm going to give you a personal example. I live in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia right now has a criminal justice system, which is just horrible. We've had more deaths in our county jail system on State Road than they had in Rikers last year. And I am frustrated because I could find very little support at a city level with a mayor that was coming out of office, with just everything. And I felt it was important for me to use the assets and tools that I had to really find a place where I could make change happen. So I started doing work on a state level. And at the state level, I found there was a good lane for change, that people were listening, that we could get some things done. So I think you have to find the right lane for yourself and where your passion is and what you will make you happy going forward from an advocacy end. But right now in Washington, D.C., there is, and it's an election year. Today is Super Tuesday for those following. And quite frankly, there is an admission up on the Hill across every party that just not a lot happens during election years. It just is the way our horrible system sometimes works when it comes to legislative advances the last few years. It just not much happens. That doesn't mean that your advocacy doesn't matter. What it does mean is that we should be setting the table for significant change going forward. So last week I met with Bernie Sanders, and we talked about education and labor, and we talked about his work on the help committee that he chairs. Those things are super important because you're creating relationships that are going to help move the needle on certain issues when they come. And these relationships are one-on-one relationships that are going to be bound by stories. So as we go up to the Hill in a few weeks, just understand that you're in a really good spot. We're not there to ask for any major ask or ask for millions of dollars for anything. We're there to create relationships. And when it comes to education and period, it crosses both aisles. There is not a senator or congressman that doesn't want people in our country smarter and that doesn't want people into a career pathway to success. Now, we may argue on how to get there. We'll put that aside. But no one on Capitol Hill or at any level, advocacy level, is going to say that that's not a good thing. That's not smart to get people smarter and put them back and get them to college and a career pathway and all those things. So you are in a total win situation. You have nothing to lose up on the hill. And that's really important to know when you go in there. There are some goals that you should have. You should make sure, and we're going to go through a sample meeting and I'm going to give you some tips, but just know that I don't think there's going to be a lot of asks for us. There's going to be some we're going to lay out for you, and we'll do that with Sheila in the next prep session. But there's not a lot of things that we're going to go in and we're going to see a significant movement on. Cece, yeah.
Jeffrey, I love how you're framing this. And when I think about what has worked for me in telling that story, it's also having the supporting facts. And so I'm excited to see your PowerPoint and the supporting resources you've given, but they're never going to read any even one-page resource we give them. So like, I feel like always knowing a couple of specific facts around exactly what we're speaking to matters. Are we going in with a one-pager kind of thing? And maybe you're going to get to that. Sorry.
No, we are. We're going to talk about it. I won't be sharing. The one pager is being finalized now. So you will get that before you go to the Hill Day. And it will go with, we'll also be sharing with you the issues that we think are things that you might want to address with your legislator, or at least get on their radar screen and talk about the importance of some things. But the bottom line is tonight, we really want to set the groundwork for what is Capitol Hill Day all about? What are the things should be on your radar screen, and not dive too much into particulars, because I think some of those things are going to be set by you individually. Quite frankly, I know that there are some issues that I'm comfortable talking to legislators about, and there's some not so much, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. But the landscape, there is no right or wrong in this. So it's just about creating relationships so that you're able to kind of continue to make move the ball forward. So what is advocacy? And honestly, advocacy is really all about the art of telling a story. And great stories have very simple language. They're surrounded by empathy and compassion and things that trigger your heart. They're also they're data filled. Cece just mentioned, I do believe the saying that a person without data is just another person with an opinion. And you want to be more than opinion. You want to be the expert in the room. Because trust me, the people you're going to be meeting with, they're going to not really know a lot about what we're talking about. Many of them will have never been to prison before. They may never have stepped in foot of prison. They may never have even acknowledged that they've talked to or worked with someone that was incarcerated before. So you are the experts walking into the field and into those offices. And then you should also know that there's got to be something you're asking of them. It may just be education, but you should always have a call to action or something that you're asking of them to do before you leave out. And then obviously it's going to be different for everybody. You got to tailor your story to the audience that you're going to be talking to and know what their strong suits are. If somebody is on an education committee, you want to hit education hard. If they're on the labor committee, you want to talk labor with them. If they're on, in the Department of Justice and they work in that space, you want to hit that hard. Like every meeting is going to be tailored based upon how you do your homework and what it's all about. Storytelling, quite frankly, is something that when you get done telling the story, I always say this, like a lot of the times I lecture, it's I know they're not going to remember a lot about what I say. Hopefully I'll give them the deck and they'll remember some of it. But they'll always remember the stories that I tell, right? They'll always remember the stories because they connect with them. And that's the same thing with legislators. They'll always remember the stories that you're going to tell. So I'm curious for all of you that are, those that want to share, jump in the pool. Is there a story? We're going to keep these short. So we're going to keep it a minute. Just a quick one. Is there a story in your professional career that you've used to trigger or get somebody to act for something? It could be one. We all have them. I know you do. You guys all have great stories because I've seen some of you speak before. But does anybody have a story they want to share just of something that they would relay that showed the impact of their work? Anybody?
Not a story, Jeffrey, but I am a journalist. I hate to say former journalist, but I've spent 20 plus years in broadcast news, and I am now an adjunct professor at a university here in Georgia. And everything that you just had in your PowerPoint is basically what I tell my students. I felt like that was a short recap of how to, tell stories and what's important about telling stories. So I don't have one. It's my entire career, but you boiled it down to exactly what it is. You're telling a story. You are capturing emotion. You are getting them to relate to something that they can feel on an emotional level, and you have to be cognizant of who your audience is and able to make that relatable to them. So that was perfect what you said right there.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks. Hopefully I'll have some more of this for you tonight. Anybody else want to share a quick one?
I've got a story.
Go ahead.
good.
Go ahead.
Trip.
Go ahead, Trip.
Thank you. So I had a friend who went 20 years in the prison system, in and out of gangs, tried to get out, tried to get in, he kept getting pulled back in. And the minute we introduced a college program, he found his purpose. And he jumped in there. He left the gangs for good. He's now out on the streets doing really well. So it's amazing what education and really empowering somebody through education can make a difference.
Absolutely. And those are powerful stories, Trip. Those are the kind of things that, really get people thinking that is it worth it? Is it worth investing time and money and effort and legislation in? So I love it. We all have them. What I do before I go into any legislative meeting is I think of my 2 or 3 power stories I want to share. Something that maybe is in a region or would reflect somebody that lives in that legislative district. So, or a story about where they came from, and if it's from Philadelphia or Pittsburgh or wherever, like I really come packed with 2 or 3 stories, and then I decide based on the conversation of where things go. I'll talk to you more about some of that in a little bit. But stories are so important. One of the big questions that I often get is, well, Jeff, I work for an agency and I don't know, I want to be an advocate, but I'm really afraid because I don't want to be caught lobbying. And the lobbying advocacy issue is something you should recognize, and we should just call it out. There are some people that work, some individuals that work for agencies where you are not allowed to lobby because you are you may be restricted as a 501c3 or in the work that you do, or you could be with a government agency that you're not allowed to lobby. I just want you to understand the difference between the two. Lobbying is asking a legislator or to support or oppose a particular piece of legislation that makes expenditures, that is something that really affects a business. It includes asking for funding, for appropriations, for it's really targeted to a specific piece of legislation that you're asking them to support or oppose. And they're almost always, when you're talking about lobbying, is funding or compensation somewhere tied in with that. Okay. So again, you're going to get the slide deck, so you'll get to see it. But really important, because you want to, if you don't want to get your agency into hot water, if you and be accused of lobbying for a specific bill. The good thing about this Capitol Hill trip, you don't got to worry about that. We're not going to be asking you to support or oppose or make an ask for or against any bill. We're going to be talking topics. We're going to be talking about subjects. We're going to be talking about things that we're asking for movement on, and they won't be necessarily asking them for a specific piece of legislation to drive through. Cece?
Jeffrey, can we just go touch back on the stories section a little bit? Because I really want to clarify this in my own head as we go into Hill Days. So one thing that I've learned in life is not everyone has the same heart and same feeling about the stories I hear or the people that I know as I do. And like, you know, retelling them sometimes just, it's like one more thing that they hear. And I've found, you know, when I'm going to meet with someone, I'm looking at what are the issues that they care about? What are the things that they're really striving for in their region, their area? And then I actually try to apply a story to that. So like when I go there and I know who I'm meeting with, I'm gonna have a couple different stories in my arsenal, even though for me, my why might be based on some other stories. Those might not be the ones that I'm sharing.
Yeah, I think the stories you share, you want to be able to connect with the staffer or with the whatever congressman or senator or whatever legislator you're talking to. You really want to make sure it connects directly to them. And sometimes it may not be the strongest story that you possibly have. It may not even be your story. It may just be a story of others that you know that you work with or that you know. So you're absolutely correct. Man?
Jeff, thanks. So we use an acronym at P2P called VPSA, and I put it in the chat.
Great.
Value, action, problem, solution, and I may have it in an incorrect order. But basically, what that is one, I would advocate or ask that all of us do a little bit of homework on our legislators in our particular area, first and foremost. And then, as Jeff said, we're not asking for donations or anything like that, but give them an understanding of what the shared value is in your ask, right? What the problem is, and then highlight, you know, what action you want them to take. Don't leave that off the table. This is a acronym we have used in our leadership model to help our scholars. We call our program participants scholars. This is what we've used to help them over the years. And we've carried this throughout Hill Day in a number of fashions and everything. So it's value, action, solution, problem, and it really just highlights what the cause is, what you're there for, and what the shared value and investment in that. You'll hear the term ROI, return on investment, and that's where you really get to lean in on how they can be part of, because all of them really want to be part of this success, right? So you're literally just feeding into their desire to be successful and be legislators and do the will of the people. So I'll give it back to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Vance. Yeah, so we're going to get to some of that as we talk through today, some of these other slides, but I think we definitely, all those are really key points in what you want to raise during and throughout the meeting. And the best way of thinking about it, like all the things you want to touch on, we're going to get to those too in a second. I also want to mention too that we talked about lobbying and the lobbying piece, but the advocacy piece is really, we heard some definitions earlier, but it's really about getting policymakers and others that set policy to act. It's getting people to acknowledge that they are that they want to see change through legislation. And advocacy work happens at all levels, and some of the most effective advocacy isn't always with just a legislator. Sometimes it's with a local council person. Sometimes it's with your mayor. Sometimes it's with, it could be a community leader. It could be a representative, a ward representative. So there's a lot of different people that affect policy, and advocacy happens at all different places. It also happens in the community as well, just educating people about the problem, about the issue. And as Nancy said, finding the solutions and laying them out there. What's your value proposition? So there are some things as you advocate and begin to formulate how you're going to do this that you should be aware of. And kind of touching on Nancy, there are some elements of a campaign, an advocacy campaign going up on the Hill that you really want to be aware of. The first is that you're there to raise awareness of a problem and to shed light on what that problem is. What are the possibility, what's the other possibilities around the problem itself, but you want to raise awareness. You're launching the door up to a problem that exists that needs to be addressed. You are also there to help develop a solution, to propose and lay out answers for people that are in a place where they could effectuate change, that they could change a policy, enact a piece of legislation, get some kind of recommendation through, whether it's at an administrative level, executive level, or even at a policy level. And then the most important piece is you want to be able to motivate them to act. You want to get them to get off their butts and actually do something. And that's really important, because you could go in and have all these great conversations, but if you don't get them to act and you're not motivating them to move forward, then what have you done? How far have you moved the ball? So think of it as, addressing the problem, helping them dig through and find that solution, but then getting them motivated enough to move forward to act. Mance?
And that was it. Actually, Jeff, you're 100% on point. So yeah, I didn't have anything to add.
Okay. Yeah, so Meg mentioned that's why having system impacted people leave the conversation so vital. Yeah, there's no question that when it comes to the criminal justice system that we work in and live in, that having the voices of those that have been impacted by the system are the ones often that have the most impact in relaying why it needs to change, what the problem is, because they've lived it, they've seen it. And our job is to get the people we're talking to wear our glasses. We want them to see the world as we saw it, as we went through the system and the challenges that we faced, because otherwise it's going to be foreign to them and they're not really going to understand how we're motivated to act, to move forward. So we're going to talk more about that as we go forward in a second. But effective meetings with lawmakers or with anyone have really certain qualities about them. And here are a few big ones. One is you want to do your homework. I think Cece mentioned this too earlier, is that you want to gather intelligence. You want to be smart. You want to find out, what are the bills that your legislator has sponsored in the past? What are the things that they're passionate about? What have they done in their community? What's going on in their community? Maybe take a visit over to their local field offices and see what's going on and what they're supporting. And then understand that meetings with legislators or with their staff are really investing in relationships. So I've been doing this. I've been home 8 years. And for 7 years, I've been working on Capitol Hill doing this work. And quite frankly, I still call upon the same people when I first was up on the Hill. Now they're with different senators. They've moved up in offices. Now they're working for, a chair of a committee now. So it's really investing in the relationship with that person that you're talking to. I also want to make this super, super clear. If you are meeting with a staff person on Capitol Hill, it is as important, if not more important, than meeting with the legislator themselves. The truth is that legislative agendas and items are often prescribed and written and documented by the staffers. They're the ones in the committee meetings. They're the one drafting the legislation. They're the one briefing the senator or the congressman. They're the ones that are setting the tone of what that legislator needs to know and what they need to push forward with. So I want to make sure you're clear. If you're meeting with a staffer, don't take it lightly. Do your homework. Invest in that relationship. Some of my best friends are people that work for congressmen and senators, because those are the people that are getting what I need in front of the legislator themselves, that are often so busy and overwhelmed. Cece mentioned this, and I think Nancy mentioned this also, is that you need to do your homework. You really need to prep in advance, and it's not that hard. I'm going to give you some tools tonight that you'll see, but there are things out there that simply going on to somebody's webpage, every senator, every legislator, local, whatever, they all have web pages. Get onto their web page, prep in advance, see what they're passionate about, see what they're doing in their district, but be prepared when you walk into that meeting. And that also means having data with you, having facts that support what you want to talk about, being organized about it, and know how to run a meeting. And there's an art to this. We're going to get into this today, right now, about the art of running a meeting. Have business cards or e-cards, absolutely. Yeah, you want them to know how to get hold of you. So let's talk about the meeting. So not everybody knows how to run a meeting or what it looks like, but I want to walk you through it so you understand some best practices. The first is that when you get to the meeting itself, that whoever has scheduled it is going to make sure everyone is there. When you arrive there, everyone wants to introduce themselves. Now that sounds really simple, but sometimes you're going to get into these meetings and there may be 5 or 6 people. You may be really rushed to get things done. You want to get started right away. The very first thing you want to do, shake hands, introduce everyone, let everyone say hello. And if there's, here's one of the things I always do, no matter where I'm at, is usually with a legislator. If I'm going into their office, I'm looking around the office. And if I see that they've been to Disney World because they got Disney, or they got pictures of Disney World everywhere, I'm talking about Disney World. If I see that they got a big Ohio State Buckeye banner where I went to school, I'm talking about the Buckeyes. Like, I'm finding some common ground when I walk into that room so that it breaks the ice. It kind of gets us started, gets us thinking about what some common bond that we're all gonna have together. The second thing is you want to be able to lead the discussion with a personal story, someone from your district or their district, something that's going to start hitting home with them when you talk about the issues that you're going to be presenting. Practitioner, explaining the policy and what the impact is really important. They may not know all the nuances of the Pell Grant. They may not understand the nuances of coming home and being on probation or parole. So you really want to be able to explain things, and the way and really simply, don't assume anything. It's like how I deal with reentry. I always say when people come home, I assume absolutely nothing. I don't assume they have a Gmail account. I don't assume they know how to use a computer. I don't assume they have clothing. I don't assume they have food. Assume nothing when you're talking to the policymakers or whoever you're with, and you want to be able to support what you're gonna say through not only data that you have, but through the stories that you're presenting. You want to have a stakeholder. You want to be able to emphasize the importance of how important it is to you and your organization. Like, why should they act? Well, you're a constituent, one, but two is you have a lot of constituents behind you. You live in a district with thousands of people that are going to be voting for this individual either at some point in time. So you want to be careful and you want to be mindful of how you set the tone and who the stakeholders are that you're there representing. And you want to also have the ask. So the way I do it is this. When I walk in, first thing I'll say is, hi, Jeff Abramowitz, so good. Thank you for having us today. Everyone goes around. We're here today to ask for your support on whatever, on educational support or educational funding for adult learners in the country, whatever it is, but have your ask ready to go. As a trial lawyer of 20 years, I learned really early that when I was in a courtroom, I would always tell them what I was going to tell them, and then I tell them it, and then I tell them what I told them. And that's how the jury believed whatever I was saying, because I tell them it, I laid it out for them, what I was asking, and then I tell them why they needed to know it. Why was it important? And then after that, I tell them what I was asking. What was it I wanted them to do? And some of the most influential cases that we have occurred in our lifetime because a lawyer was telling a story that got people to sing their song. I had a law professor who was my trial lawyer professor, and he said, you want to get the jury to sing your song whenever they leave the jury box. And it's really true, right? And we see it in our own days. What's the most famous case, one of the most famous cases in the world? The one saying, everybody knows it by now, the O.J. Simpson case. If the glove don't fit, you must acquit, right? One saying stuck out in the jury's mind so much that all of the evidence that was presented, led them down a different path. That's what you want to do when you go in and meet with legislators. You want them singing your song. So you want to be able to lay it out there and be able to tell the story in such a way that they are singing your song when they walk out the door. And that's super, super important to understand. There are a bunch of tricks and tips that I want to walk you through. And these are things that I live by when I go to do these meetings. The first is if you're on a call, so if you're doing this virtually or if you're live, everyone introduces themselves. They say their name and the agency that they're from, and maybe what the agency does, because they may not know, what you do at the prison, whatever program. So you want to make that clear. You want to make the ask in front of, at the very beginning and again at the end. The last thing you should be saying is, I hope the senator will consider doing this. I hope that you'll blank. You want to make sure you have that ask, and it may be more than one. It could be 2 or 3. You want to leave some time to talk and ask questions. So most meetings usually last between 15 and 20 minutes. Sometimes you'll get a half an hour, but you want to leave at least a few minutes. And I always end with, I'm asking you, I'd like you to consider doing this, then this, and this. And do you have any questions for me? And that's really important. You want to know what they're thinking. They will always have questions. But you want to know what's on their mind. Are you ringing their bell or are you way off base? And the other thing I'm going to tell you about asking questions is this. You don't need to know all the answers. So a lot of times we feel compelled when we're in these meetings to answer or make things up or whatever. I will tell you that there are times in these meetings that I know the answer, but I say that I don't. And the reason that I do that is because I want another bite at the apple. So sometimes they'll ask me a question and I'll say, you know what, I'm going to have to get back to you on that. I need to check the data or the facts on that, and I'll get back to you. And it opens the door up for you to come back again. And you could call them later that day. Can I follow up with you later today? Can I call you tomorrow? So sometimes I may have the answer, but I want another bite at the apple because I think that they're right where I want them to be, and I want to continue to build on something that they've said. So don't think you need to have all the answers. And when you do have the answers, don't know that you have to always give them everything. Sometimes it's okay to come back and say, I'll get you that flyer, or I'll give you this piece of this study that just came out. Adult learners participating in the call should always be prepared. So if you have other people with you, you should meet with them beforehand, especially if it's a student or someone you're bringing with you. You should be prepping them and talking about, well, let me hear you tell your story. How does that work? Just go through it with them. Do a mock kind of interview. Yeah. Cece had a question.
No, I said you just busted yourself. Now I know when you don't give me an answer, you actually know the truth.
Oh.
You're just waiting.
So you want to make sure that they're prepped and that and most importantly, that it can't be higher level. It really's got to be pretty practical. Like you want basics. Like, how did it affect your life? How did it affect their lives? How does it affect society and the community that everybody lives in? So you really want to be super practical about all of that and be able to lay it out there. Sorry. So pro tips 2 is take notes. So I'm a huge fan of this. Even if you don't have notes, take notes. And the reason, even if you're not writing you're just writing gibberish down, you want to be engaged, and it sends a weird message when you're not prepared and you don't have pencil and paper there or pen there. And you really want to be able to, you want to, at least for it to appear like you're jotting things down. Most importantly, you want to note things that they've said, because that could lead you to other roads that you may want to explore either that day or a follow-up. So definitely you want to have paper and a pad with you to take notes. You want to have material with you. You want to have a 1-pager or 2-pager. You don't want to have 50 pages. A 1-page document with the data on it is super helpful and super good. And it doesn't have to be complicated. I have the one thing I use is this. So this is a 1-pager, and you see there's boxes. It's really simple, but it tells the whole story. That's all it is. It's just a 1-page document, and there it is. 18,000 students I served. I served 7,700 volunteers, 120 tutoring sites in the country. Like, those are things that pop. It's simple, it's easy to read. It gives them the facts, just what they need. I mentioned about following up later on. You always want to say thank you to the staff, or I always want to say thank you. I grab a picture, and I always take a picture of the staff member so that they can see that, it's a big deal. We usually get it in front of the state flag where we are, and we get some some social media out on it. You want to make sure that you get all the materials to them, that you give them your card and your contact information. And then you want to answer any questions and what's the best way to follow up. Like, should I call you next week? Or, will you let me know? Or should I get you, can I get you some documents next week? Or can we schedule a meeting next month? Or whatever it might be. But what's the next steps are super important. The last one is, this is hard for us to accept sometimes, but believe it or not, we're the experts. We are the experts. We were the ones that were behind the walls. We were the ones impacted. We were the ones that can tell the stories. When you walk in there, hold your heads high, be the expert, be the one to share what they need to know about the topic, because they want to learn from us. They want to learn, they want to understand it so that they can act in the best interest of their constituents, of yourself. You also want to localize the story, make sure that you're talking about the state, the different districts that they're in. You want to get it as personal as you possibly can with the individual, and then share the stories of the people that you're representing and that you're working with. That's really important. We heard some of them today. So a mock meeting is a great way of preparing, just going through and kind of going through a mock scenario of, what's the meeting going to be like? Get everybody on a call together and kind of walk through the discussion of the points you want to raise. Okay, Cece, you're going to take this point and this point. Antoinette, you're going to take this point and this point. Trip, you're going to take this point and this point. And you don't want one person to monopolize it. You want to move fast, get all the issues out, and then see where they go and see where they want to guide you, because they may have some questions and they may guide the discussion. But be prepared when you go through to do a mock meeting, and that helps kind of set the tone for the whole day. The resources and tools that are available to you are simple things. I don't get too complicated. There are some complicated ones. There's something called Fiscal Note. And Fiscal Note is a place where you can find out all the legislation that's pending, who sponsored it, what its history was. I don't think you need to get that granular unless you're really going in to support a particular bill or a particular issue that you're pushing hard on. I just went through this with ability to benefit, which is a big piece of legislation that just got amended. But we really needed them to understand the consequences of ability to benefit, and really went in with the legislation. We highlighted it for them. We showed them what the issues were, but we really we were able to get some of that history online and through other resources. But you want to have tools available to you. Google is by far one of the best things. And then there are some other advocacy tools, which I'll be sharing with you. COABE has a great advocacy tool. It's coabe.org, and they have great advocacy research tools on education and educational support. That's something you might want to check out and think about. Here's their email address. It's coabe.org. And COABE is the Coalition on Adult Basic Education, and they represent adult educators in the country. So 50,000 members of COABE, and 5 million plus students that they represent. Now, it isn't centered on justice. It's centered on education and adult literacy. Adult literacy can mean a whole bunch of different things, but generally math, reading, career technical training programs, workforce development, anything that drives people into those basic things you need to succeed in a career pathway. But a great thing to check out. Another great resource is links. So I put the QR code here, and one of the other hats that I wear is I work for the U.S. Department of Education, and I moderate for links and oversee the correctional and reentry community of practice. So this is free. It doesn't cost you anything. And really important for you to be aware of that there are a lot of invaluable resources in the correctional and reentry community, where not only are there events that takes place, but there's a whole bunch of resources for you in the in this platform. So it's free. It's from the Department of Education. Highly encourage you to check it out and join in. Check out the resource tools, because there are a lot of them on there and things that you might be able to use in your advocacy work. Won't talk so much about PD Green program, but it is an awesome program. I'm really proud to be part of it. I'm going to stop in a minute and ask for questions and kind of talk through some things. But before I do, I did want to share with you that at the end of the slide deck is my contact information if you have any questions. But you're going to see all of these resources for you. So things like the USA Skills Map, things like laying the groundwork and all these different studies that are out there. So there's one big slide. There's a whole slide on data, prison jail data from 2022 for prisons and jails. Super, super helpful tool. If you've not used it before, it's something that you definitely want to check out, because this is data. This tells you the prison population in our country. And let me see if I don't know if you can see it there. Probably not, because it's on my other screen. Let me see if I can pull it for one sec. But this is a great resource tool. This is all about, it's a graphic that comes out, and it's all about the prison population. And this is just got updated again. But you'll see there's a grid here that shows how many people are locked up in the United States. Now, this is fantastic to hand to somebody and say, what's the scope of the problem? Here's the problem. We got 1 million people in our state prisons, 500,000 in jail, and 450,000 of them have not even been convicted. they're in prison simply because they can't afford cash bail. So you see, how impactful these graphics are. And there's a lot of them. Pick out the ones that you're maybe hitting on, that you want to tell the story about. And these are really the important resources that are there. So I know that that will kind of be helpful for you. There's studies in here from the collateral consequence studies and recidivism studies. This is also things regarding homelessness and data on homeless, things from the Vera Institute. There's also some resources from links that I posted on here. So there's a lot of really good stuff that could help you getting data. The other thing that I did is I took all of the things that I mentioned today, somewhere in these links are things about advocacy and lobbying, about telling stories, and that could really be helpful for you if you're looking to really fine tune your skill set in teaching, in advocating. So that's kind of where we are. I'm going to stop the share for a second because I wanted to give some time for an open discussion and see if anybody had any questions. And we're kind of right on time. So we have about 9 minutes left. And I wanted to kind of talk through any issues that you might have, any questions about what's going to happen on Capitol Hill Day. Tanaj Moody, how are you, my friend? It's great to see you.
Thank you. It's awesome to see you as well.
So anybody have any thoughts, any concerns? Anybody a little bit nervous? You're all pros, right? We've all done this before.
Jeffrey, I do want to say that resource list you gave us at the end of that presentation, I mean, what a gold mine. I know when I first started in this work, just collecting all of that research on my own, I'm finding new stuff every day. So thank you for that. Do you have all of that besides in this presentation? Do you have it like in a PDF or an Excel document that you could also share?
So I do, and I will share out. I do keep it on. I have it on my website. It's updated all the time. So one of the benefits of the work I do is I have a number of graduate students that work with me that are able to keep up with the latest and datest of the research projects that are out there and things that are happening that may not necessarily be in front of all of you. For example, one of the things I would encourage all of you to think about in the next, as you go up on the Capitol Hill, is something that is really pressing right now, which is the Digital Equity Act. So those that may or may not know, the Digital Equity Act was passed as part of the infrastructure legislation. And in that act, there's a specific call out for having better digital literacy and digital equity in our prisons and jails. Now, it is built into the bill. It is one of these things that's a call out and says we need to do a better job giving access and digital literacy to people that are incarcerated and in the criminal justice space. So I think it's something really worthy of mentioning. And the reason I say that is because, quite frankly, as all 50 states submitted their digital equity plan, and in the coming few months, there's $2.4 billion of funding coming down for digital equity across the country. And the people that are really not at the table in our country are people that are doing criminal justice work. And that's really sad. I think I took a poll recently. I sit on the Pennsylvania Broadband Commission, but there are very few people that are active in their committee on their broadband commissions nationally. We need to be active. We need to be at the table because one of the biggest gaps in reentry and helping people reintegrate as they come home is providing them with the digital tools to succeed, knowing how to use a computer, knowing how to use an iPhone, knowing how to, it's the first thing we task people with when they come home is to get a job. And, gosh, getting a Gmail account may be a monumental task for them. So, we really want to be able to educate legislators on the need for digital literacy and being able to support the law that's already in place. Judith?
Yes, Jeffrey, thank you so much for, number one, this wonderful presentation. And number two, bringing that up, because that is in fact one of our asks. So when Sheila does her training, we're going to get into the particular asks that we have for this Hill Day event, that being one of them, and the pressing urgency that we have to ensure that not only they're passed or they are implemented, but also the oversight that needs to happen. And I want to assure you guys that nobody is going to go in to meet with the legislator alone. We're tagging on teams, so don't be concerned that you're going to have to be speaking on your own. There's going to be at least 2 to 3 of you guys each meeting with your members, and so we're trying to make it comfortable not only for us but for you as well when you're speaking to your legislators. And I can't stress enough, if you're able to start that connection and that relationship building, as Jeffrey mentioned and others in the call, with your local legislators, because that's going to not only ease the path, but also make this a worthwhile, one of a first, but continued work that needs to be done.
Awesome. The other thing I do want to mention too is, there's something really valuable in asking a legislator or staffer or inviting them to your program. So if you run a program or you're part of a program, they want to see what's happening in the field. Give them an invitation right there, to come out. We'd love to have you as a guest at our graduation. We'd love to have you come and to take a tour. We'd love to have you be a part of our advisory board. Make the ask and try and engage with them so that they can come see it. When you see it and you touch it and you feel it, it becomes so real. And that's a really impactful way of advocating. Tanaj?
Yes, thank you. And I second what Judith was saying. This is amazing wealth of knowledge and information, and it's great to just be in community with a lot of folks. I see my family on here, so happy to see folks. And I just have a question. So this will be my second time going to the Hill, so I am still learning as I go. And one of the things that I want to focus on this year is bringing to the forefront of the research that Light to Life has completed with P2P around reducing sentencing for domestic violence survivors who are incarcerated. Currently, I'm on a coalition in Oklahoma where they're getting a bill, SB 1470, passed for the Senate to vote yes for this bill. And essentially, it's the same bill that was passed in New York City, which is known as the Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act. And this bill primarily is to allow sentencing court to resentence a domestic violence survivor who has, suffered from different forms of abuse that have contributed to their conviction. That they have to meet a specific criteria. So my question is, when it comes to, like, for instance, Washington, D.C., I'm not too sure as to like where this would start within like the DC area, right? And I'm not too sure like where to look to see like, are there certain things that are active that are working towards what other states like New York City and Oklahoma are already doing?
Yeah, so there are resources, and if you email me and just say, Jeff, I need some guidance on this issue and who's doing what nationally, there are national landscape maps and that we use through Fiscal Note and some other platforms that we use. We also have a lobby group called Penn Hill Group that researches those issues for me, so I know right away who's talking what. But you raise a super good point. I don't know if you intended to do this or not, but there are some issues that are ripe for Washington, and there's some issues that are not. And, the best way for you to lose an audience is for you to raise an issue which they have zero control over and no appetite for. Just be mindful of that.
Right.
You remember you're in a federal system where they're looking at federal legislation. And I say that with all due respect to the reality that sometimes you wanted that issue in front of the person too, because it affects their local district. But there are some things that the federal government could never move upon. And if that's the case, you may want to be able to maybe just mention it, but not press hard on it, because it may not be in that senator's lane of travel. It may be more of a state issue that he might totally want to stay away from, because he just doesn't have much control over it. I will also mention, though, that state senators and federal senators in the federal system also talk a lot, right? There's this great bond between a lot of them, and because they're the grassroots, they know what's happening in their local districts and things. So I'm not saying not mention it at all. Just be really tactful and intentional of how you do it and what your ask is for them. They're not going to sponsor a federal piece of legislation, but they may say, I could talk to some of my colleagues back in my home state and see if I can get them to support it. And that would be a wise play for something like that. But Tanaj, if you have those issues, and same thing with everyone, feel free to email me, and my email will be in the slide deck. Feel free to email me if any questions, or even call that day and say, Jeff, not sure about this. How should we handle this? And I'd be glad to field the calls that day and kind of address it. Or even at times, I'm up on the hill a lot. I may even be close enough to walk you over a fact sheet for something that we can leave with the senator or congressman before we go. I am sorry. I am unbelievably sensitive to time for people, because I love to be on time, and I know that we're 1 minute over, but I just want to be respectful of all that. I will hang out for a little bit more, but I wanted to thank everybody. Judith, I'll make sure you get the slide deck and you can share it with everyone else, including my contact information. I wanted to thank everyone for being here. Looking forward to a productive Capitol Hill Day.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Yes.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
You're welcome.
Judith, are you staying on?
Yes.
Just a quick question for you and Jeffrey. When you mentioned the teams earlier and, working with each of the individuals in that meeting, I think that brings a good point to how Jeffrey described to set up the meeting. Are we getting those assignments by next week before we meet with Sheila, so that we can meet with those teams to decide how we're going to handle those conversations, like when you said with the mock meetups?
Well, you should already have your assigned legislator that you're meeting with. If you don't, we have a spreadsheet, and I can definitely tell you which ones are for you. The the time itself for the appointment, we're still in the scheduling process.
Oh,
But
I
the
meant
individuals
that also with who, it'll be me and you and Mickey, or who's going to each of those. Do we have those assigned yet or no?
Oh, not yet, but for sure you and I. So those that are, because we don't have duplicates in every state that we are representing, we'll have to make assignments based on who's available during that time. So who does not have another appointment? Like you and I will be together because we're from the same state, but we are uniquely placed because there's not many people coming, double up on the same state. So how we're going to make those assignments is based on who does not have a standing meeting at that point.
And is there a need for any states that are really impactful in the ask that we're making that do need to be talked to that we can fill in for, or isn't that part of this process?
From what I'm hearing, and maybe Jeff can speak more of this, they are not so inclined to meeting with people who are not their constituents. That's why we try to have those target states or those target representatives represented with our group. But Jeff,
The only thing,
about that.
yeah, the only thing I would say to that is that's true, but there are some people like myself, because I represent two national organizations, they want to meet with me, it doesn't matter. So if you represent an organization that is in multiple states, then I think that captures it as well. You don't necessarily have to reside in the state, but if you have some connection to the state, I think that they'll meet with you and they'll give it as much credibility as somebody maybe that's not directly a constituent.
That's good to know, because that way we can maybe consider, Jeff, some of those states that we want representatives from and we don't have constituents coming.
For sure. And if you have states like that, Judith, and you need me to cover any of them, let me know. That's
Perfect.
I was gonna volunteer the same thing. As long as I'm flying in for this day, like book me up. I'll do back to back, like really as much as we can help, just as impactful as we can make it. I'm willing to step in. So if there's anything I can do, let me know.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Sure.
so the good thing that you should know too is that I got a memo on the continuing resolution from Congress on Monday. So there are some bills that are being considered for funding, and including some of the earmark bills. So I'll have more information by Friday, but there may be some asks that we want to make because of earmarks that some senators or congressmen may have access to. So, and as some of them are putting them out now, I'll give you an example. I was just in a meeting. John Fetterman from Pennsylvania is going to be supporting a bill to overturn the there's a housing there's a housing bill that directly affects people that have been incarcerated. So we're working on he's going to be supporting that bill. So there are different bills that are going to be coming up that I think we'll be able to possibly make some headway on.
Jeffrey,
Okay.
since you brought that up, I was going to ask you, and this is, I think, a good place for that. Since there's this infighting going on around the FAFSA modifications and how that's affecting the federal budget and, whether they need that money back and whether they're going to follow through on this, is there anything around that component that we should be aware of stepping into this? Because I feel like that's going to be a big issue on the table.
So that's really tricky. There's a lot of components to that issue. For example, the Department of Education recently gave some student loan relief. You saw in the last few weeks, the president gave some student loan relief. So there are a lot of pieces of that are I don't think that they're going to be considered until May or June. And I'm not even sure that they're going to be anything of substance. I think they're going to be kind of keeping a level playing field on things. There's a lot of those things that are going to have impact. I know the earned retention tax credit that was during COVID is thinking about being withdrawn, and that could help. It could literally, my agency could get $400,000 of tax benefit from it, and that may get wiped away. So there's a lot of bills that are like that I think are on the table. But because the continuing resolution is not really going to address many of those things, it's not likely that you're going to see a lot of movement on any of that. And what's even more interesting is that a lot of these bills that are funded are really, we're going to be talking about 2025 funding when we haven't even thought about 2020. We haven't gotten 2024 approved yet because we've just been in this continuing resolution mode.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Anyway,
Right.
well, thanks everybody. Judith, I'll get you the slide deck, and then yeah, it was good. It was a good turnout. Thank you.
Absolutely. Very informative too. So once again, Jeffrey, thank you for everything that you're doing for us. So appreciate you very much.
No, you're welcome.
You
My
did a great
pleasure.
job. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Last question. Who's my legislator so I could do homework on them?
Where are you?
Who's this?
Ricardo. Hi, Judith.
Hi, Ricardo. How are you?
Okay.
So let me tell you real quick who your legislator is.
My Zoom thing is not, my video is not working, but I see all of you. I see you. I hear you. I'm with you guys. So, but I'm a little but I like I really enjoyed everything that you said. And if I do my homework, I'll be, and then I also like the idea that, we're going as a group. So, I really.
You're going with, you have a big group actually, Ricardo. You're together with Tyson and Mickey. Who are the three?
Hi, Mickey.
Let's see. So you're with Tyson and somebody else in your group. Hold on a sec. I'll tell you right now.
No problem.
I believe that's Maryland, that's Kiwisi McFume. And we've
All right.
already sent the request. We're waiting on a reply for scheduled meeting. So
Great.
you are with Tyson and you are with Jessica, I believe, or
Okay.
Jacob.
Okay, great.
Tyson and Jacob.
Great. And then who's my legislator? Who's the one that I need to do a background check on?
So it's the House and it's Kawisi, and I'll text you the info. How about that?
Por favor, por favor.
No problema.
Okay, gracias. Thank you all. Have a great night.
Definitely, we can bring up the ESL,
Okay.
but we'll talk about that when we have those legislative asks. Okay,
All
Ricardo?
right.
Bueno.
Buenas noches. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.